Dr. Good morning.
That worked.
So Dr. Alissa Jerud, who is our expert presenter today. And so together, the two of us are really going to dive into a combination of Jewish sources and science-based sources to help us all feel a little more strengthened and empowered by knowledge-based practices that will guide us through our parenting or our relationships. Those of you who are parenting grandchildren or who are not parenting anymore, this is sort of an open conversation for all of us to share and to enjoy. And one of the ways that we start our learning on Friday mornings is we breathe, because we have to remember to do that. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to breathe once. And then at the end, we're going to breathe 3 times as we sort of bring in Shabbat for ourselves and for our families and our communities. So that's kind of how we're going to start. But if you have to leave because life and you have to go somewhere, that's totally fine. So feel free, to do your thing and be comfortable and to relax. And the other thing that I will ask is that if and when you speak and share something with us, just share your name so that we can get to know you and reference your Torah that you're going to teach us, because we're learning 3 kinds of Torah today. I might say we're learning the Torah of our Jewish tradition. We're learning Torah from Dr. Alissa Jerud, and each of you have the Torah of your lived experience, your wisdom, the things that you've seen that you bring to the table. So if you tell us your name later on, we can reference your Torah, which is a Jewish value to reference Torah taught in somebody's name. So please share your name, and we're gonna get started. So I have to remember to breathe. So everyone, let's breathe. Did I introduce myself? I think I did, right? Okay. Okay. Feet on the floor. Remember that they're there. Feel them. Connect to them. 1 deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and then we're going to begin. Okay. So I want you to introduce yourself just for a moment. So let us know about who you are and what you've been working on. And then we're going to turn to some of this wisdom on the page that you and I put together.
Sounds great. Okay. So I am Alissa Jerud, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist, a clinical assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And I specialize primarily in the treatment of anxiety-related disorders and emotion regulation difficulties, including those that come with parenting. And so really, I'm kind of...
That's in the DSM, right? Like emotional regulation disorders that come with parenting? Because I have that. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I mean, I will say, we'll get to this. I think Erin's going to bring us to this in a moment, but parenting is one of the most amazing jobs there is, and it's also one of the hardest jobs there is, and comes with some really intense, oftentimes unwanted emotions. And so my hope today is that I can offer you all some science-backed strategies to help you better navigate those strong emotions that you may encounter, or that you will encounter on your parenting journeys, or just in life in general, so that you can enjoy parenting more, maybe even find it a little bit easier. So that's just a little bit about me and kind of why I'm here, what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So having said that, we wanted to open up the conversation so that when Dr. Alissa Jerud and I are, sorry, what do you want me to call you?
Alissa.
Alyssa's fine. Okay. But she is doctor. Very cool. Okay. So when Alissa and I are talking, we're going to reference Jewish wisdom, science-backed wisdom, but we want to hear from you guys, those of you who feel brave enough to share in this moment, your name and something that's challenging about parenting. And that, I mean, like where to start, right? Like, what are you finding challenging in your parenting right now? We kind of want to, we want to like open that up. Okay, brave person. Thank you.
I would say being consistent is my hardest.
Oh, such a good one. So hard. Yeah. Okay, we're just gonna go around the room. Yeah, everybody's jumping in.
And I would say try not to control my children and what they do, what they eat, when they go to sleep, what they feel.
Oh, trying not to control how they act. Oh, so true. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Alan and Lori. We'll get to you. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think not taking it personally if they do something insulting, if they speak unkindly.
Oh, yeah, so true. So hard. Lori.
Not taking on their overexplosive emotions as my own.
Yes.
I can't stop.
Oh, it's so hard.
I don't know where I fit in with it anymore,
Yeah,
which is why I'm here. Thank you.
yeah. We got you. We don't know either, but we're here together.
Okay, that's really comforting.
Amanda, teaching my little ones to be cautious and careful and wise without putting anxiety.
Right, scaring the crap out of them. Yeah, totally. Yep,
Turning them to me.
totally. That intergenerational Jewish anxiety that we like to pass down. Yeah, thank you.
Dahlia, and I would say, working with my partner to figure out how we can parent when we're both coming from very different backgrounds and upbringings.
Yeah.
And how we can blend the two. When we have very different ideas.
Yes, co-parenting, so challenging. Fascism is so much more effective than democracy, right? So true, yeah.
Parenting multiple kids with different needs. And also, which is, everyone does, but also. If there's consequences, that one is being dealt, is it fair, and how do you
Right,
do that with the other one?
fairness. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Shira.
Hi, I'm Kira. I think the hardest thing for me is being present with my kids while there's like a million other things going on logistically and how to manage that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lonnie. I think one of the challenges that I'm facing is trying to feel confident in implementing some of the strategies that we're learning when there are a lot of external forces and people around who have opinions, especially when we're out of the room.
Yeah, it's impossible to parent in a vacuum, right? We don't parent in a vacuum. We live in a community. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Janie.
I have a question.
Yes, Janie.
My children are grown, however, I guess my question, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm working in private practice and I still do with parents. So my question is, how do you deal with social media and the influences of not only the phone, but social media? And how do you regulate that as a parent? How do you agree on the regulation? And how do you determine developmentally which, what child should be allowed what and what child should not be allowed? And I think that's a whole area that, I struggle with and parents struggle with. So I'd love to hear your opinion scientifically and judaically.
Okay, so judaically, yeah. Okay, so social media. So I think we've heard we're surfacing a lot of really great questions and now you're not alone in these questions. So Shabbat Shalom, we've solved everything for you. No, I think that's honestly a huge part of parenting in community is sort of just naming things that are on your mind and feeling a little less alone in them because we're really all wondering the same thing and finding that type of support together. So now that we've heard from you things that you're working through, and we'll hopefully address some of them as we go, but if we don't, we're going to give some time at the end for specific questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're going to start with your first principle, right?
Yes,
Of
but
welcome.
can I actually do a little bit first?
Yes,
First?
yes,
Okay,
go
sorry.
for it.
So
Yeah.
stop me if I need to stop at any
I
point.
will.
Okay, so I think what I heard from all of you is that one of the things that's challenging is there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to parenting, knowing again, whether it's with social media or navigating a relationship with your partner or setting and holding limits and how do you do that, right? It's just it's not quite always clear how we go about that. And we oftentimes end up feeling some pretty uncomfortable emotions in the process, especially when there are so many competing demands on our plates, when there's judgment from the outside world, there are just all these things coming in. And so I want to know before I answer any questions, before we get to any of my stuff today, is that there is not one right way to parent. And if anything that I or Erin or anybody else in this room says today, rubs you the wrong way, doesn't seem like it doesn't resonate, seem like it would be helpful for you or your family, please disregard it. I also want to note that I had a colleague yesterday who reached out to me who said she's so excited to read my book, even though she knows she's going to be sad when she reads it because she doesn't always parent, in her words, the right way. And I wrote back and I said, that is the last thing I want you or anybody to feel when reading my book, because we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we've got, and there is no right way to parent, right? And we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And so I just like, before diving into anything, I want to be super clear about that. So my hope today is that I can help you feel empowered, right? That together we can help you feel empowered with some, you know, like ideas from Torah, with some science-backed strategies for better managing those challenging emotions that you encounter in your life as a parent. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Also, before we get to the source sheet, the only other thing I want to note is just kind of like what emotion savvy parenting is. I realize it's not on the sheet, and it's probably worth me mentioning it. So it's really rooted in the science-backed or the evidence-based treatments that I provide in my clinical practice for anxiety-related disorders and emotion regulation difficulties. And at the heart of these treatments is the idea that we can feel really strong, unwanted, uncomfortable emotions and still choose to show up in the world or to kind of move through the world in ways that are effective and consistent with how we want to roll, with like who we want to be as people. And so, you know, another way to think of this is that we don't have to let our emotions call the shots. We can feel strong emotions and still do what matters to us, what's important to us. And so extending these ideas to parenting, emotion savvy parenting is really about helping parents learn how to let in those emotions without, again, letting them govern how they interact with their kids or with the world. So that's a little bit about it. I will say that there are no head-to-head comparisons comparing emotion savvy parenting to other parenting approaches. And as like the research kind of side of me, like that background, right? Like I wish there were. And what I can tell you is that the tools, the strategies that make it up, that comprise it, have tremendous support, clinical support, research support, supporting their effectiveness in helping people live more emotionally agile lives. And so that's really what I hope to help you do today. And so that actually then brings us to that first point on the source sheet, which is to welcome all feelings. And this may sound really simple and like easy to do, but it's actually really counterintuitive for many of us. Because if you think about it, we are evolutionarily wired to want to avoid pain, whether that's physical pain or emotional pain. So if I accidentally put my hand on the stove, what am I going to want to do? Yeah, take it off, right? And if I'm feeling really angry, anxious, sad, whatever it might be, I'm going to want to try to distance myself from that emotion, to not feel that, to shut it down in some way. But unfortunately, we've got a lot of data now to suggest that those attempts to avoid or suppress unwanted emotions oftentimes backfire and actually prolong and exacerbate our suffering. They don't work so well for us. And even if we could, in theory, like turn off those emotions when they show up, it actually wouldn't be so adaptive for us, because all emotions, the pleasant ones, the unpleasant ones, they all serve an evolutionary adaptive function, right? And they convey important messages to us, to others. They help motivate us to take like effective and necessary action. And so it would not be in our best interest by any means to just shut those feelings off. And it's also just not possible, right? And so welcome all feelings is the idea that, right, all feelings are valid. They're there for a reason. Again, that kind of adaptive function we just discussed. And with that in mind, ideally, we can aim to welcome all feelings in our kids, no matter how messy, excessive, unreasonable they may seem. And one of the reasons I like to think of this, or one of the reasons I think this is so important, is because I like to think about our emotions as being kind of like the weather. And if you think about the weather for a minute, it's unpredictable. It's coming and going. Storms are coming and going oftentimes with little warning. And the same is true of our kids' emotions. And just like we can't control the rain, we can't stop the rain, we can't do it with our kids either. And so sometimes I think of it as like the act of trying to get our kids to stop crying or whining or whatever they may be doing is, in my mind, is sometimes as kind of fruitless as trying to hold up buckets to the sky when there's like a downpour, trying to catch the rain and stop it from falling to the earth. Like, sure, you might catch some water, but it's inevitably going to come spilling out. And that's the same with our kids. Like, we might be able to distract them out of their tears for a moment with a cookie or with a silly song. And yet those feelings don't just go away. They're still there, and they're going to come out at some point down the road that might even be more more inconvenient for us, more overwhelming for us to have to navigate then. So that's the first kind of like or that's like that second bullet point on there. And then what I will say is that oftentimes, I think I heard this in the room, those emotions can sometimes pull, that our kids have, can really easily pull for some pretty strong, uncomfortable emotions in us that can feel so overwhelming. And so ideally, we can, rather than just try to shut those down, and we'll talk about ways that we sometimes try to do that don't serve us so well, but ideally we can welcome those emotions too. And then today I want to teach you what I call the art tools, which are science-backed strategies that you can use to help you manage those uncomfortable emotions that you may feel, whether it's because your kids are doing something or because you're trying to navigate parenting differences with your partner or whatever it might be. So now I'm going to turn to Erin.
Yeah, so when I looked at Alyssa's work, I paired each concept with a Jewish source. And so sometimes there's something to unpack in the Jewish source, and sometimes they're more of a mantra, like a meditation. And the thing that really came up for me when I was reading about this idea that we have to welcome all feelings is the idea that everything inside of us is good, right? Dr. Becky Kennedy, who's like a psychologist and Instagram influencer, podcaster, highly recommend her work. She talks about all kids are good inside, right? This idea that like we really do believe that, but in actuality, it's very hard to put that into practice. And so right in our prayer book, every morning, the Ashkenazi prayer book, there's this meditation that if you're happen to be in morning prayer services, you probably skip through it. And that's probably how you missed it. But it's a really good one. So I'm gonna read it as like almost as just a meditation on the themes that Alissa brought up for us. And then we'll just move on to the next principle. God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, and you preserve it within me. You will eventually take it from me and restore it in me in the time to come. So long as the soul is within me, I give thanks to you. And for me, this is just this feeling of wholeness, that like all of our feelings are somehow good and instructive and purposeful, and not like a part of us that's, you know, to be combated, like, and sort of welcoming, you know, as Alyssa's sort of instructing us to do, like welcome these feelings as valid with this mindset of curiosity and welcoming them like old friends with compassion, and sort of cultivating that attitude that it's all good. It's just what is it trying to teach me?
Oh, I love that. And I think just piggyback on that before
Yeah,
diving to the
yeah,
next one, because I think sometimes as parents, but as you know, even if we're not parents, there's like this idea that we shouldn't be feeling certain things. If I'm a loving mom, I shouldn't ever feel bored or angry with my kids, or, you know, those uncomfortable emotions. And that's just not the case, right? We are human, we're going to feel those feelings. And so we can welcome them. And this brings us to the second point, recognize that though our feelings are incredibly important, we don't ever want to try to ignore or dismiss them, they aren't always the best guides. And if you think about it, our feelings are always coming and going, right? They're never permanent. And one moment you might be happy, then you might be sad, then you might be, you know, tired, then you might feel energetic, right? Those emotions, those physical sensations are always coming and going. And so we can let them in without needing to let them dictate what we do or don't do. So this next section, control yourself, not your children, is all about not only welcoming those feelings, but then letting your values guide your actions as opposed to those ever-changing feelings, right? So instead of when you're angry with your kid, letting that anger, like kind of acting on that anger, you can feel that anger without having to act on that anger, right? Still showing up as you want to with your kids. And then ideally, well, and yeah, I guess I'll note that one other piece here is that oftentimes as parents, it is so, again, if you think about the fact that we're wired to want to avoid pain, it is so normal, so natural in those moments, especially when our kids are doing something that's stirring up some strong unwanted emotion in us. It's really normal and understandable to want to try to control our kids, to not have to feel so uncomfortable ourselves, right? So our kids are messing up in some way, or our partner or our colleague, they're doing something that we don't like, and we want to get them to stop so that we don't have to feel so uncomfortable. The problem with that, a few things are like here, as normal and understandable as that is that the only person we really have full control over is ourselves. And with kids, what I find in my clinical work, in my own life as a parent, is that oftentimes our attempts to control them backfire, right? Like maybe I can get my kids to stop doing something in a moment, maybe because I, use some kind of control tactic. I raise my voice or I offer a threat or something like that. But not always. Sometimes then they continue doing the thing that, that's aggravating you, or they up the ante, they start doing more of those things. And even if it does work in a given moment, one of those control tactics, the problem as I see it with them is that each time we try to reduce our own discomfort by reaching for one of those control strategies, that habit of having to turn to those control strategies when feeling uncomfortable just gets stronger. Right. And so as far as I'm concerned, we're so much better off learning that we can feel the uncomfortable emotions and focus on controlling our own behaviors rather than trying to control our kids. There's that. And then kind of just related to that, and I think somebody talked about this, we're going to talk more about acceptance later, but instead of trying to control our kids, what they choose to eat, how they choose, to walk or talk or whatever, we can ideally aim to accept them exactly as they are. And we're going to talk more about acceptance, but
Yeah, for this one, this text jumped right out at me. If you've been to Jewish summer camp, you've probably studied this one. Eza hu gibor, right? Who is strong? One who can control their own impulses. Your yetzer is this drive, right? Your drive to do good, your drive to do bad, but it isn't in and of itself your drive. It's an impulse. And so in order to really be curious about why we do what we do and sort of aim to try to break that, behaviors of like, I was yelled at, so I'm gonna yell, or, like how we parent, we have to really create that space between our emotions, recognizing our emotions, and jumping right to an impulse, to an action. And that's the strength. That's the ball game. That's our Elsa moment, right? Elsa figures out that she can control her powers with love, not fear. Spoiler, I just spoiled Frozen for you, but I feel like if you haven't seen Frozen by now, it's love, not fear. You should see Frozen. But anyway, it's like it's your superpower, but it can be deployed for good or for bad. And so I think the person who is really the hero, is really strong, is the one who can kind of integrate all of these teachings and control that impulse, that behavior that was so ingrained in us that we're all working to relearn and reparent and support each other.
and it's easier said than done. So I will give you
Whoa,
some tools
yes.
too that might help, but again, we're not going to be perfect at it. Yes, Jeremy. Yeah.
I'm curious, you talked about acceptance rather than control. Is also, would you say with control, the idea, the concept of like defensiveness goes kind of hand in hand with, it could go hand in hand, rather than want to control their emotion, I'm becoming defensive in response to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And moving towards that acceptance.
Yeah, for sure. Moving towards, yes, instead of like when that pull to be defensive comes up. So I'll give you an example. This morning, my daughter, she was really angry with me and she told me it was because last night she had a dream that we somehow got tickets to go to a Eurovision soccer game. It doesn't exist. And I was so excited. I could care less about soccer. I was so excited that while we were on a private jet, I somehow decided to pull her hair and I yanked out half of her hair in excitement. And I was just like, oh, okay. And right, like I could have gotten really defensive there, right? Because I think there was a part of me that was like, why is she thinking that I would pull out her hair in excitement? And just recognizing that that discomfort that I felt within me, accepting it, letting it be there, while also allowing her to be mad at me for in her dream pulling out half of her hair. I don't know if that speaks to what you're saying a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, with what you're accused of doing, so right, they're sharing their anger. How could you do this?
Yes.
Or I'm upset that you didn't give me the toy that I wanted. Or
Yeah.
I need to watch that show now. And want to get defensive. No, it's the right thing to tell you no.
Yeah.
Rather than hearing right what they are trying to share with you.
Right. And can we do both? Can we allow ourselves to feel uncomfortable and to still validate that they're upset, acknowledge it, let it be there? Yeah, like I get it. It stinks that like I can't give you that when you really want it. I get that. And that brings us to that next kind of point on here, which is to set and hold firm limits. And I think that's the idea that our kids, like, they're not always going to be happy, and that's not our job. In fact, if we were to help them, if we were to try to ensure that they're always happy, one, it wouldn't be realistic. It wouldn't be something we could actually follow through on, but we wouldn't be helping them learn that like they can tolerate painful, uncomfortable emotions. It wouldn't teach them how to move through those. And so we can set and hold limits even when that makes our kids unhappy. Even when they're begging for that toy in the store, you can still say no. And I think, Joy, you mentioned like consistency, setting, like being consistent. Sometimes I think we kind of waffle there because we see our kids getting upset and then we feel uncomfortable. And so we retract a limit that we set just so we don't have to feel so uncomfortable. And I want to know, I'm not saying like don't ever bend limits, because I do that all the time, to be honest. But I think it's important to be mindful of why you're doing that when you do it. Sometimes like we reflexively set limits, we say just no. And it's just because it like comes out of our mouth when it maybe it could be a yes. And so in those cases, like I think it's perfectly reasonable to maybe change the limit and let it go of it. And if you're doing that because of the discomfort, the emotional discomfort you're feeling inside, or you're feeling because you're seeing your kids so uncomfortable, I encourage holding that limit instead and then welcoming whatever tears, whatever outbursts happen to follow. Yes.
So, it's a very interesting topic. I have a kiddo who is neurodivergent,
Mhm.
and setting limits is very, very challenging. I mean, we do that, but then, the bending part,
Yeah.
when that's not how they function, that's not how they see the world. And when you bend that a little bit one time, how that works in the future. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that too, of
Yeah.
how to bring in firm limits while working with different brains,
Yeah.
different kiddos.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what's tricky is it's going to depend, right? For each kid, every family is different. And that's why I was saying that there's no right or wrong way. I think the big thing is more just to be very intentional and aware of why you're doing what you're doing. Maybe even if your kid can't fully understand your explanation for it, I would still name it, right? Like, oh, you know what? I'm realizing there's really no reason why we couldn't do this first instead of that. You know what? Sure. If you want to go ahead and, if you want to read before we take a shower tonight or before brushing teeth tonight, why not? Right. And so, like, I think just making it very clear why you're doing it is probably the most important thing. And recognizing too, though, that like, yes, your kid may not be able to get the rationale for that. And it might lead, I think that's the other piece that I don't have on here, but recognizing there's this idea that or research shows that like what we call intermittent reinforcement, occasionally getting what you want is actually the hardest schedule of reinforcement to break. And so recognizing that when you occasionally bend the rules, it's gonna make it so much harder for your kids to like let go of trying to get you to bend those rules, because they've learned, oh, like if I keep asking for something, mom eventually bends the rules. So again, I'm not telling you don't ever do it, just recognize that. And when you make that choice to bend the rules or the limits, be really intentional about it and mindful as to why you're doing so. Yeah.
Thinking the same thing as in, do you think, and again, everyone's different, but you can help say like, today.
Yeah.
Kind of naming like, in this moment, don't ask me tomorrow, but today.
Yep. Last night at bedtime, I told my daughter I actually like, I don't go back into my daughter's room to tuck her in a second time after I do the first time. I'll give her a hug if she comes to my room. I don't. Last night, I've been away like out of at night for different reasons, like at night. And so I haven't been there. And so I was like, you know what? I hear you're missing me. And so, yeah, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come in your room to give you an extra tuck and an extra hug and kiss in your room tonight, even though I don't usually. I let her know that my guess is tonight she's going to ask for one. And I'm going to say, love you, sweetie pie. I'm happy to give you one here. And I'm going to say goodnight because I've got other things I'm going to do. So.
Yeah, for me, the holding firm limits was really interesting to think about what's the equivalence like Jewish source of wisdom. And it really goes back to creation, right? And the first separation that ever there was, which was this Kabbalistic myth of the way that the world was created with God's light kind of filling the whole space. And then the idea that the world could only exist if God retracted God's own light so that there was a separation between God and the world. And so in order to enable creation, there had to be this initial retraction and creation of separation between you and God, or me and the child. And so like life is sort of separation from the moment they come out of us or come to our family, they separate a little bit at a time. And so this idea that what you're doing is creating space between you by holding that firm space of this is now a Dirty Dancing reference. This is my dance space and this is your dance space. And it's all seems soon, like it's all this value of like, it's all good things. It's God's infinite light that fills the universe in so many different ways. But in order for the world to exist, God had to pull back. So it's like in those moments of like, it doesn't feel right because you're having a meltdown and you really want this thing. Like my related story is my 4-year-old who's neurodivergent was like, I want to play with the blender because I have to know how it works. And I'm like, this is my firstborn. I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to let you do that. Like, I'm not sure. Like I would have thought it would be clear when I'm supposed to say no or not. And it was not clear to me. Like, I'm pretty sure blender is a hard line, but you're so convincing. You are desperate to know how the blender works. And so even like an innocuous example to an extreme example, like this understanding of like, I have to separate me from you in order so that I can see you clearly and give you what you need. And so when you have these big reactions to the boundary, it isn't, we're not like together, it's like from you, and it's sort of like big angry ball of feelings and it just splats between us, right? Like there's like that space. And so like that for me is in those moments, and they just get bigger and harder in my experience. But having that separation is natural. It's creative. It's the part of the process. My friend and colleague.
One of the things that I've noticed in having two very different age children, and also still very grateful that my mother is still alive and having her close by, is the reparenting. So what am I doing differently than how I was raised, and why am I doing it?
Yeah.
And part of me is my mother lacked consistency, but she didn't explain why. And that left me at a loss all the time. So with my children, it's a lot around communication, especially around my capacity.
Yeah.
So I may change it because I really don't have the capacity to have this conversation right now. And that's why it's a hard no. It's not because I said so, it's because this is my capacity to support you in this decision right now. Like the blender, I would love to show you how the blender works. We're gonna make a smoothie right now. I'm gonna hang out with you, or I don't have the capacity for that right now. So we're gonna have to do that another time. Like, and it will vary depending on how I can communicate. But the thing that like where I connect this back to Judaism, this like negotiation conversation about everything, like I'm big on that. Like a lot of like, I've watched other parents, including my co-parents, who are like, this isn't a discussion. We just don't need to discuss it. I'm like,
Yeah.
We're Jews. These are little Jews.
We will have a negotiation conversation and it can be exhausting. But that is what I'm raising my children to be able to question everything.
I love it. And I just want to piggyback off of that because I think you mentioned something that when there wasn't consistency and there wasn't an explanation for that, it was confusing. And I sometimes think of these limits. It's not just about separating us from our kids, but also it's kind of like bowling, right? If you're bowling with bumpers and you're not a good bowler, I'm not a good bowler. So for me, it's a lot more fun to bowl with bumpers because I can just roll the ball and I know it's going to get to where I want it to go. But if I don't have those bumpers, half the time it's going into the bumper lane, right? Like it's falling down. And so I think for our kids, it's like they can then just roll however they please almost if we're setting and holding those limits, those bumpers for them to bump up against. They can bump up against them, but we don't have to retract them just because they're bumping up against them.
Love that. Let's move. We're going to hit a few more and then we'll take a few more questions.
Cool.
Soon. Yeah.
Okay. So next, the final point I'll just know briefly, because I don't even know what to do.
We're good.
Okay. All right. Is that all behavior is a form of communication. And so I think sometimes we think like, oh, our kids are acting out because they're trying to be manipulative, mean, defiant. And really, I think there's a psychologist named Dr. Ross Green. His work is fabulous. And he talks about the idea that kids do well when they can. And when they're not doing well, it's because they're trying to let us know something. Maybe they don't realize they're trying to let us know, but they're expressing, hey, I am feeling overwhelmed. Maybe I'm flipping out over the fact that you gave me a red cup instead of a blue cup, but it has nothing to do with the cup. It's actually like something that happened earlier today, or I'm tired. I need something. And so just recognizing that, because oftentimes when what happens when there are undesirable behaviors that our kids are emitting, there's this pull to want to nip those behaviors in the bud. And well, that's again understandable, because then we don't have to feel so uncomfortable. The problem with it is then we don't actually ever get to the root of the behaviors, of what's causing the behaviors. And so our kids are probably just going to keep emitting either similar behaviors or even more frustrating, upsetting behaviors. And so ideally, we can recognize that, and instead of just trying to target those behaviors, maybe get curious. What's going on? What's leading our kid to do this or that, before just trying to modify the behaviors? Now, I just want to note too, because I realize that there are probably many people in this room who follow certain behavioral modification plans or things like that with their kids. I'm not saying you can't use those by any means, right? If that works for you, great. And before jumping to a consequence or, a reward, maybe just thinking about, what is this behavior actually trying to tell me?
Beautiful. So we're gonna do the ART. This is a great acronym. These are the ART tools.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go through them quickly.
Okay.
With a leisurely stroll.
You've got it.
With purpose.
I like
And then we'll open up for questions.
Sounds great.
Okay, sound good for everybody else? Okay. All right.
So the ART tools, I call them the ART tools. They stand for accept, regulate, and tolerate. And so these are based on, again, like kind of the science-backed strategies I use in my clinical work. And I'm going to talk through each of them: accept, then regulate, then tolerate. So accept is all about welcoming whatever shows up, accepting whatever shows up within or outside of us. The idea, just to be clear, is that acceptance is not the same as approval. So you can accept something and not like something. You can also accept something while hoping that maybe one day it will change, right? You can accept that right now your kid has a really hard time at morning drop off, even though you might hope one day it'll be a little easier to drop your kid off at school. So we can accept that. And the reason for that, why acceptance is so important, is because one, acceptance oftentimes feels better for us and for others. If you think about it, like if somebody's nitpicking at you all day long, criticizing you, doesn't feel all that good. Doesn't leave you feeling good about yourself. It doesn't leave you feeling good about the other person, and it doesn't leave you feeling all that great about the relationship itself. So that acceptance feels better. And it's also the catalyst of change, because in order to bring about any change, we have to first really understand what's going on and accept it exactly as it is in order to know how we might be able to intervene. So it's like really, really important to strive for acceptance whenever possible. Easier said than done, for sure. Ideally, though, especially with our kids, right? So we can not only accept our own feelings, our impulses, our thoughts that maybe aren't so fun to have, but we can also aim to accept the behaviors in our kids, the thoughts, the feelings that are outside of our control, assuming these aren't doing any harm to anyone or anything, right? So obviously you're not going to accept unsafe or destructive behaviors. You're not going to accept that let your kid play with the blender, but we can aim to accept other things. So I think somebody was talking about that, right? Like we can accept what they choose to wear, that even if their clothes don't match and they've got stains or they're backwards, like we can accept that if that's what they want to wear. Accept, even sometimes I would say, like, unless we want to put duct tape over our kids' mouths, we can't actually control what they say or what they don't say. So we can aim to accept those sorts of things. Accept the feelings. Again, the thoughts, sometimes they might say like, I hate you. And that hurts. That might not feel fun. And can we accept those words and the feelings that are underlying them, even if we don't believe the words themselves? In terms of how to go about embracing this kind of accepting stance, mindfulness is a tool that can help us get there. And mindfulness is all about acceptance of the present moment. So acceptance, like awareness and acceptance of your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations, your environment, what other people are doing, without judgment. And I'm not going to go into too much on this, but there are kind of two different ways we can practice mindfulness. One is just to notice. So noticing what's happening within you or outside of you. And the other is to participate, like fully, almost like imagine if you're in a conversation and you're like in a ping pong conversation where you're not evaluating how the conversation's going, you're just kind of responding contingently to whatever is being said. That's what we can do with mindfulness here. And what's neat about mindfulness, sometimes people think mindfulness is something that we've got to practice. We have to like go away to a quiet place and practice for 30 minutes at a time with our eyes closed. But it's actually something we can do in your practice anytime, anywhere, on the fly, whether we're with our kids or not. And it's just about taking a moment to tune into the present. So that could be as you drink your first sip of coffee in the morning. It could be as, you know, you're watching your kids play on the floor. It could even be as your kids are screaming at you at the top of their lungs that they hate you, right? That you could of mindfulness. And when participating, ideally, like with our kids, we can, you know, if we're playing with them, we can let them take the lead and mindfully just participate, do what's effective, what kind of like respond to them contingently, again, without letting those judgments kind of get in our way or distracting thoughts get in our way. And when those judgments, distracting thoughts do arise, mindfulness is oftentimes described as the act of losing or of losing your focus 1,000 times and then bringing your focus back to whatever it is you're being mindful of 1,001 times. So we can accept that when we're with our kids, we're going to have those judgmental thoughts. We're going to have the distracting thoughts, the thoughts about the million other things we're trying to juggle. And we can let those be there, notice those, oh, yep, I'm having those distracting thoughts again, or those judgmental thoughts about the fact that my kid keeps doing this. I'm going to gently bring myself back to just mindfully noticing what's happening right here, right now. So that's mindfulness and a purpose.
Yeah, and I think that my most used parenting mantra around acceptance that I remind myself when I'm looking straight in their little faces, even if they're screaming, I hate you, which happens all the time. From Samuel, right? Hannah couldn't have a child, so she went to the temple and she prayed for a child. And when she got her child, she said, "This is the child I prayed for." And so for me, this is the child I prayed for, like this one in this moment, in this, in any world, in any circumstance, I would choose you over and over again because you're here and I'm accepting that it's you and you're here. And also the benefits of you challenging me in this moment. Like, this is the one, you are the one for me. This is the child I prayed for. I have to remind myself of that.
Yep. I love what you said there, because so often there's this thought like, oh my gosh, if only they would stop doing that, then I wouldn't have to feel this way. And I actually try in my work with parents and my clinical work, I try to help people see those moments that we kind of dread, that we wish we didn't have to encounter, not as moments to avoid at all costs, but also golden opportunities to practice relating differently, more skillfully, more effectively to those uncomfortable emotions that those situations kind of stir up in us. So I love that. Yeah. So number two, or the second kind of art tool here, is to regulate. And regulating is all about how might we be able to make ourselves less vulnerable to experiencing painful, unwanted emotions in the first place, and even go about changing those emotions when those emotions do arise and aren't serving us well. So, right, because sometimes those, like, you know, sometimes we feel anger and it actually is helpful. We feel anger, and so we like talk with our teacher's kid about the thing that's happening at school that isn't working for our kid. And then the teacher kind of changes the strategy because of that, right? So that anger isn't harming anyone or anything. It's actually helping us advocate for our kid. And there are times where those emotions maybe aren't so helpful. And so these skills are all about how can we go ahead and start to change those emotions. I do want to note though, and this is not on the source sheet, but I do just want to note that one of the things that can help us to change our emotions is, again, to be aware of them. Like I talked about with acceptance, we can't change anything unless we fully understand that thing that we're wanting to change. And so one thing about emotions that I hope to leave you with today is that our emotions are actually much more complex than many of us realize. And sometimes it seems like, you know, something happens and then boom, we feel a really strong emotion, and that's it. It's just like that emotion is there. But there are actually many things that happen kind of that lead to that emotion. And then that emotion itself is made up of many different components. And so I'm not going to get into all the details, but I will just say, I like to, like, another way you can think of this is almost as though those emotions themselves are kind of like a batch of cookies. If you think about a batch of cookies, just, you know, chocolate chip cookie, You see the cookie itself, it looks delicious, but you don't see all of the ingredients that go into it. You don't see the sugar, the butter, the flour, the chocolate, you see the chocolate chips, but you don't see all the other ingredients when you're just looking at the cookie as a whole. But just like cookies are made up of wet and dry ingredients, the same is true, and then you mix them together and it makes a cookie. The same is true of our emotions. And so I like to think of our emotions as being made up of primary and secondary ingredients. And the regulate skills are about going after, targeting, addressing the primary ingredients. And then the tolerate skills, and I'll get to in a moment, are kind of about how can we go ahead and change those emotions, the secondary ingredients, the ingredients that we see when an emotion has already fired, essentially. So to regulate skills, how can we change an emotion or maybe prevent an emotion from firing in the first place and then change it once it does arise, whereas the tolerate skills are about when an emotion is in full swing, how can we go ahead and change it? In terms of the different skills that I have on here, I'm not going to go in depth into any of these, but they are problem solve to change the prompting event, reframe unhelpful thoughts, recognizing that oftentimes the completely normal thoughts that we have about our kids that are kind of that skew toward the negative, they're so understandable. We're wired actually to have those kinds of thoughts, just recognizing that they don't always help us. When we're having the thought like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this again. They're such jerks. Like, how could they? Those thoughts can really impact how we feel and how we act. And so there's kind of strategies we can use to help shift those thoughts to be more effective, more helpful, and more realistic. And then the final one, like none of these I'll say are rocket science, these tools, but they're ones that oftentimes, especially when we're feeling strong emotions or when we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we kind of just like let go by the wayside. But it's really important in order to help render us less vulnerable to painful emotions, to make sure that we are resting, fueling, and moving our bodies in ways that leave our bodies feeling good and like kind of ready to take on the day. So those are the regulate skills.
Yeah, I would also add it's interesting to think about the ingredients of the baking of the cookies of emotion is like a sensory component, which is a whole different workshop. And if you have a kid who's neurodivergent, different sensory levels, that's a word that you know, but the rest of the population is like, what is a sensory component? But like thinking about how the sensory input that you're getting is impacting your emotions also. And the text that I picked for this one is really about skill, right? So there's this saying in the Babylonian Talmud that our parent is obligated to teach their child to swim. Why? It is necessary for life. And so is it about teaching them to swim because if they fell in a lake, they wouldn't drown? Or is it about is it a metaphor and navigating for life? But I was listening to this podcast the other day with Dr. Becky, and she was like, sometimes my clients ask me like, at what age are they going to be able to do this skill? And she's like, that's like asking me like, at what age are they going to be able to swim? Like nobody just reaches a certain age and knows how to swim, right? You actually have to like teach a child how to swim. And so a lot of these skills of regulation that I definitely did not learn growing up or were not modeled for me or were never taught to me personally, these are skills. These are things like at a certain age, a child might naturally learn to regulate their emotions if you have done the work to give them the space. So naturally learn how to regulate their emotions. But thinking about our obligation as parents to teach our children to swim is kind of the same thing of like teaching a skill of how to regulate your own emotions by doing these things, modeling these things, practicing these things. And then those are skills that our children will be able to build out their capacity for, which is sort of our obligation if we think about it that way.
Yeah, I love it. Yep. And just that modeling piece is so huge. Our kids are like sponges and they learn so much from what we do. And so sometimes you can even like kind of speak like, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm realizing I'm feeling really grumpy because I haven't had a snack. Like I'm going to go grab something. Or sometimes if my kids are starting to melt down, sometimes I just know, oh, I should probably put something on the table for food, not force them to eat, or that's theirs to control. But oftentimes just having a healthy, nourishing snack for them can go a long way when kind of emotions are running hot in our home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Final one here is tolerate. So again, this is like that we can't always prevent emotions from firing in the first place. We are going to sometimes feel some really strong, unwanted, uncomfortable emotions. And how might we be able to let those emotions in, feel those without letting those emotions hijack our behavior, without leading us to act in ways that we might later regret or that are going to make the situation worse for ourselves, for our kids, for everyone involved. And so the skills are, again, not rocket science, but they're kind of some neat skills, I think, that go after each of those components or each of the ingredients within that second ingredient bowl that I mentioned. So for instance, like our emotions, part of what makes up our emotions are really intense, uncomfortable physical sensations. If you're angry, your heart is probably pounding through your chest, right? Your muscles are tense, you're feeling hot and sweaty. So can we go ahead and target that arousal? Maybe bring it down a notch, even though that anger may still be there afterward, it will probably. And so that's where the care skills come in. For those of you who are familiar with dialectical behavior therapy, that's where these come from. So it's DBT is the treatment, but in DBT, they're called the tip skills. I love these skills. I think they're fabulous. I've seen them work wonders with people. And I always found that acronym to be really clunky and kind of awkward. And so I transformed the tip skills to the care skills, because when we're feeling really strong unwanted emotions, we need to take care to make sure that those emotions don't kind of get the better of us, essentially. So we can cool with ice, activate your body, relax your muscles, and exhale slowly. And I won't go into all of those right now because I don't think we have time. Yeah.
Maybe take us through one loop.
Okay, so I think one of the coolest ones is cool with ice. And it's really based on the idea that when we are in very cold water, if that ever were to happen to us, our bodies, we are evolutionarily wired to have our hearts slow down. Our heart starts kind of slowing down and stops pumping blood to our extremities in order to conserve energy and heat our core. And so one thing, when you are flooded, you're feeling really intense emotions, one thing you can do to maybe like slow that heart rate down a notch is actually to take a cold gel ice pack, like a flexible gel ice pack, and put it over your face to mimic or to like evoke that, what we call the dive reflex. So it can evoke that dive reflex. And I will tell you, this is a disclaimer, this skill, if you happen to have any heart conditions, medical conditions, it's worth talking with your doctor before using this skill, because it really, I've seen heart rates plummet by 50% or more in under 30 seconds when using this skill. Like, it's kind of wild. It works as quickly, as effectively as some substances that maybe aren't so good for us, but without the harmful side effects of those substances. So you can do that, put that there for 30 seconds. Or you could even dunk your head into a bowl of cold water. It can get kind of messy, but you could do that if you wanted to do that. Leave it there for 30 seconds and that heart rate really does drop. Now, with each of these skills, like the care skills in particular, they're really fast acting, 30 seconds, and you're feeling differently. But the important thing to recognize is that they're not long acting. So while they work quickly, but they're not going to last forever. And so that's why these skills, it's important that you're layering these stress tolerance skills with additional skills to help you accept and regulate those emotions too. Other skills, again, they're the skills in the care acronym. I'm not going to go into each of those now. But opposite action, I'll just really quickly touch on just because I love it. It's fabulous. It's really the idea of acting opposite to the uncomfortable urges that come with your emotions. So if you're feeling like screaming at your kid, maybe it's speaking lovingly instead. If you're feeling really anxious about letting them do something that like you think maybe might be risky, but is probably objectively safe, letting them do it anyway. So that's opposite action. Then there's distract and self-soothe, and then mindfulness of painful thoughts and feelings.
Wow, I mean, so much. I think here's what we're gonna do. I think we're going to breathe. We're going to put into some of these practices into place by giving yourself some self-care, some one breath for you and all of your amazing work that you're already doing, because by showing up at a parenting program, you're already really in the right headspace. You're really showing that this is something you're taking seriously to learn and to grow. And so you should give yourself a really big breath on that, because you're already doing a really, really great job. The second breath going into Shabbat is thinking about community. And so breathing for your people, your friends, your family. Do not try to parent alone. There should be a disclaimer on it. You have to have support and family and chosen family and community. Parenting should not be done alone. There should absolutely be a disclaimer on that. And then the third is for our whole world, a breath of healing and peace and sending out some good vibes to the whole world, because you're engaged in really important work that's parenting people who are going to go out and make a big difference in that world, and it is in deep need of healing. And I want to encourage everyone to stay and chat with Alissa. And also, if you're interested in purchasing books, Alissa does have a few copies of her new book available. So you can take all these skills home with you. And if you are interested in continuing to learn with us at Beth Hillel, Friday mornings, you're always welcome, or JKid Philly. We are always exploring ways to parent in community a little bit better to support each other. And we have another wonderful opportunity that's called Magic Moments. If you have somebody who's, what ages of children? 0 to 24 months. So that's a very, specific window. So you can talk to these folks over there about that. And I want to say thank you for your time and your expertise. And you've shared a lot with us that is going to help us go into our Shabbats feeling a lot more empowered and more present and more cared for. So with that, we're going to breathe and then we're going to say Shabbat Shalom. So everybody feel those feet again on the floor. And I invite you to close your eyes if you want, or you can also bring in, your breath with your hands too. You can do that as well. Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Alissa is here for to sell and sign books. I'm gonna say goodbye to you on the Zoom. Rachel, yes? Wait, sorry, Rachel's talking. Shh.